I'd like to introduce a colleague and friend of mine, Rush Cosgrove. And Rush has journeyed to us from England. He has 2 master's degrees, where he's University of Oxford and University of Cambridge, respectively, both in higher education. He's currently a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge, with his focus on critical thinking across the curriculum. And he, too, has had quite a few experiences facilitating workshops abroad, in Mexico, Turkey, and in England. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rush Cosgrove.
Hello. 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 You'll see from my bio that I was introduced to critical thinking at a very young age. Some of you will know how that came about. Others may find out as the conference goes on. And I can remember the sort of before and after. That is, I remember going to a traditional school, and I was highly successful. I did well. But as I got older and started thinking for myself a little bit, I remembered asking myself why we were studying what we were studying. So I can remember in 3rd and 4th grade I started asking, well, teachers would say, we'll learn this, and I started saying, okay, well, but why? What's it good for? And I started thinking how I might apply what I was learning in school to what I was doing in my life, and just finding this incredible disconnection. And no one that I asked could give me a good answer. And I remember doing things like long division, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I think we did long division for like 4 months. How many, I suppose there are infinite possibilities, but how many times can you really do long division, after we stopped doing long division, I can't remember having done long division ever since. I can remember this, I remember thinking of school like a prison. And I remember this very clearly, that I thought of it as doing time, right? I have to be in school from 8:30 to 3:30 or whatever it was. And I remember, just thinking of it as just get in, do what the teacher says, get the grade, and just get out. And so I did that for a couple of years, and after long, I don't know, if there was something in me, it just couldn't be contained, and I started, I suppose I was a bit of a nuisance for my teachers. I can remember one teacher saying, okay, does anyone have any questions? And I raised my hand, and she said, except for Rush. That's a sign. That teacher retired after that year. I don't know if I had anything to do with it. So I remember on the day that I was going to go into 6th or perhaps 7th grade, I couldn't bear it. The possibility of going back to school and being in that classroom and having people talk at me and having to do these ridiculous assignments. So I enrolled in a program, a tutorial that had critical thinking at the heart of it. I remember when I first started working in this new way, at first it was very difficult for me because instead of being judged to some average standard of, when you are this age, you shall know these things and be able to do these other things. Ludicrous concept. I was actually being judged against what I was capable of doing and where my strengths and weaknesses were. And so, well, I ran into a lot of weaknesses. But I rebelled against this at first. I remember even thinking for a little while that I wanted to go back to traditional school, but then as soon as I seriously entertained that idea, I just said that was not going to work. But I started to come around when I realized that what I was learning was actually having an impact in my life. And I remember this very clearly as well. I was taking a history course. We were focused on the history of the Middle East. And I remember that as a result of doing the readings and the work in this history, where I would, for each reading, I would write a brief summary of what I read, which began with the key question which the author seeks to address in this section is, and I believe the key conclusions that the author came to. So just two of the elements. And I remember reading an article in the newspaper that was focused on Israel and some happening in Israel. And I remember never really understanding this conflict that was going on, and it was presented to me as, well, it seemed my reading of the news was that these two different peoples, and they're just fighting all the time, and they've just been fighting all the time, and they just will kind of be fighting all the time, and there's not much we can do about it. That was my reading. And I remember reading an article and just finally realizing that, well, this was just blatantly untrue. Actually, for hundreds of years, there were quite amicable relations between Jewish people and Muslim people, while the Christians were out torturing and inquisiting. So I remember thinking, well, it can't be something that's just intractable, that just is a part of the religions, because, well, the religions, I just didn't get it. And so I remember that this was a moment when I actually took something I learned in school and was able to understand the world that I lived in better. And that was when I just couldn't deny the usefulness of what I was doing. And that began my, though at the time I didn't realize it, that began my commitment to education, because it showed me the possibility. What can we do as educators to empower students? That gave me a really clear idea. And so since then, it's been a slow journey of learning the tools of critical thinking more and more deeply, applying it to more and more aspects of my life, and focusing more and more on what Enoch brought in, which is developing a community, developing intellectual communities. And my current research is focused on a staff development initiative, faculty development initiative, which seeks to infuse critical thinking into every classroom in the university, and trying to extract some ideas of how we can actually change systems of education so that students are not simply telling stories of the one teacher that they had or the few teachers that they had, but that they go into every classroom and they see how to think critically in biology, how to think critically in history, how to think critically in chemistry, and how to think critically about their lives.